to close down because of the name of systemic restorative justice? Are you against cash and release? Are you against cash bail? Are you against the idea that people can shoplift and not be held accountable for their actions? Let's talk real accountability for actions and not false accountability for words. I believe that stabbing someone is worse than saying a word. Both are bad. Me, Mr. Traditional.
In this video, Steven Crowder and race grifter Marc Lamont Hill join Piers Morgan Uncensored. Steven Crowder slams Marc Lamont Hill over his statement that saying you want to live in a predominantly white neighborhood is racist. With that, let's watch Steven Crowder destroy Marc Lamont Hill.
Can we both, if we want to find common ground here, agree that, yeah, we really find ourselves at a weird point in this country when a bunch of people are giving to a lady who yells the N-word at a 5-year-old, and a bunch of people are giving to someone who is famous for no other reason than allegedly stabbing an innocent person? I know that we'll say it's because innocent until proven guilty, but this is the information that we have on both of these scenarios at this point in time. And what I'm discussing is the prescription moving forward. And one final thing. Here's the point that I was making that you didn't show in that clip too, was saying that it's racist for someone to say they would prefer to live in a predominantly white neighborhood, or they would prefer to live in their neighborhood, which is not black, I believe is what they said. And I don't believe it was necessarily her. I believe there was a man on the panel who said that, but you do. And I'm not going to attribute racism in your heart because only 4% of the population where you're placed in Los Angeles is black. I think we need to stop attributing and imbuing hatred, and I think we need to stop empowering them. But we do find ourselves at a point in this country where neither of these give, send, goes would have blown up if it existed 10 years ago. Why? How did we get here?
I actually, well, Mark, I'll get you to respond. I have to say, in a way, completely different scenario, but how we got here, I think the same blame can be attached to how we got here to what is going on with the reaction to Joe Biden's health news. I made a point last night on X when that story broke. I was staggered by the instantaneous mockery, abuse, glee, ecstasy, desire for him to die that poured out in response to my tweet revealing this news about him having aggressive advanced stage 4 prostate cancer metastasizing to his bones, which is clearly an incredibly serious situation for a man of his age. And I just made the point, the guy served his country for 50 years, whatever you think of it, this is the moment to him well, isn't it? The answer was no, and has carried on being no for the next 24 hours in the most stunningly abusive, horrific, ghastly manner, totally inhumane to me. And I think the common theme, Stephen, of the two things is social media. Social media has, I think, inflamed social and racial tensions to a point where people just don't think the normal rules of society apply. They can be as disgusting and inhumane and racist and sexist and whatever they want to be as they like, with no accountability in almost every case. And we've become almost neutralized to that kind of thing. And part of the problem is that when people like you and me, and Mark, I'm sure, launch staunch defenses of the right to free speech, the wrong ears take it as the right to be openly racist and all these other things with no accountability. They misunderstand what free speech actually entails. It doesn't mean you're never going to be held accountable for what you say. When Shiloh Hendricks said,
do you guys remember the last video I did on Marc Lamont Hill, or did you see the clip from Piers Morgan Uncensored where he melted down over one of the panel members basically saying, I have the right to say the N-word, and then Piers was challenging that guest. He's like, well, go ahead and say it. And Marc Lamont Hill just flipped out, saying that the person shouldn't say that word and Piers shouldn't encourage him because he was the only Black American on the panel, and that if this woman said that word, it would be like verbal violence to him or something, like verbal discrimination, some ridiculous term. Like, the whole point then was he's super soft and emotional. And obviously Steven Crowder made a point that we're all aware of where, white lady says the N-word to a child, completely wrong, inappropriate, but a lot of people are supporting her. And then on the other side of the coin, you have Carmelo Anthony, whose first instinct when he was challenged by someone was to pull a knife out and stab him in the heart. And you've got an entire community of people behind that person. And Steven Crowder asked, how did we get here? But I bet Marc Lamont Hill can't even answer that, because I guarantee he's one of those morons that's on Carmelo Anthony's side because he despises white people. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Said that she said the N-word, whatever, this was her right to free speech. Yeah, but everybody else has a right to hold you accountable for it. And it's the second part of that equation, which is, I think, important. So, Stephen, your response to my thesis.
Yeah. Yes, I disagree. I think social media is a part of it, but I also don't think that we're dealing with an accountability culture as far as the country. I think we're dealing with a false accountability culture as far as the media and those in the establishment. You have myself, for example, who was demonetized, throttled on YouTube for simply using the term lispy queer, someone who referred to themselves as a lispy queer. It was a quote. Then moved over to Rumble, and after the exodus, Diageo, in charge of 80% of the world's advertising, told Rumble that it wasn't enough to demonetize myself, but that they wouldn't spend $1 of advertising on the entire platform, an alternative platform to YouTube, unless I was removed. You've had entire governments try and remove platforms for freedom of speech. This is not the accountability that people in the streets are calling for. What is being called for example, from people in the media, is a lie. They would rather hear a lie than the truth. And so you have people checking out. For example, someone's afraid to say, could be my black neighbors, but it's anecdotal. I'm not supposed to say the black friend thing. Move to the same neighborhood I have because it's safer and there's a stronger sense of community. But if you want me to lie to you and say, I picked that neighborhood and it just so happens to be more mixed or more white, but my neighbor's a former Dallas Cowboy, you can demand a lie, but the media is demanding the lie, not the American people. I am in no way concerned going down to a black neighborhood, because I do it, to the tune of hours, hundreds of hours of footage and hundreds of millions of views discussing these issues. The challenge I run into is when someone else, a third party, wants to play a game of telephone and tell them that it's racist. You can go and watch. I had not one, not two, but 10 people in this installment say, yeah, I think all lives matter. I think anyone who says that's white supremacy is out of their mind. They don't speak for us, the black community. I'd never know that unless I had that conversation with them. Very few people are doing it. You're demanding a lie of people.
Okay, Mark, your response.
Lots of things. Again, first, I think Stephen is, and I don't assign to you any ill intent, but you're comparing apples and oranges here when we talk about the Carmelo Anthony and the racist woman, I can't think of her name, video.
Lily Gaddis.
I think, as you pointed out,
Shiloh
all day,
Hendricks.
no, not Lily Gaddis, but
you're talking about Shiloh Hendricks.
Yeah. Shiloh Hendricks, yes. When you talk about context, I think we have to look at context in the context even of these GoFundMes, right? The people who are funding Carmelo Anthony, you can tell this from the comments, this isn't my guess, they're not saying good job. They're saying, we don't believe that you're guilty. We don't believe that you've gotten a fair legal process. And so we're sending money to make sure that you get a proper legal defense because we don't believe that you are guilty of this crime. That is what they're saying. Now, you and I may look at the evidence and come to the same conclusion or a different conclusion.
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
But they're not attempting to reward the behavior. They're attempting to challenge a system that they feel like is misrepresenting the behavior. In the case of the N-word and this woman, right, Charlotte, what's happening is quite different. They're not saying, hey, we feel like she's taken such a loss from her free exercise of free speech that we want to reimburse her for that. That would be a different argument. I still wouldn't want to do it, but that would at least be logically and morally consistent. When you look in the comments and when you talk to people who are funding that campaign, they are literally shouting the N-word. They are literally echoing the racial epithet. And that is different. That's why I say, if this is really going to be a First Amendment cause, again, and not the lie that you're talking about, then let's invest in actual First Amendment causes and not this. And to your second point, I agree, and then I got you wholeheartedly. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with making decisions about where you want to live. But there's a huge difference between saying, I want to live in a statistically safe neighborhood, or I want to live in a historically safe neighborhood, and I don't want to live around black people under any circumstances. And again, the latter is what came out in our conversation on the show the last time. And we're melding those two things as if they are the same, and then acting as if there's just no room for a white person, or a black person for that matter, to exercise any radical honesty about where they want to live. I ain't met a person yet that doesn't want to live in a safe neighborhood. I want to live in a safe neighborhood. I also want to live around black people. People can make their own choices, but let's not pretend they're the same thing.
Okay, we've got to end it there. Yeah. I would say, in answer to your question, Stephen, I would say in both the GoFundMe cases, I think it's wrong. I think the
Stabbing is worse than a word.
I think the intentions on both sides are actually malevolent and wrong. They're not doing it out of any great sense of social justice or anything. They're doing it because they're taking a side based on skin color in both those stories, I think. So I think
Murder is worse than yelling.
Yeah, listen.
I think.
You know, allegedly stabbing someone to death is worse than
and
using
getting
using an ugly
railroaded
word.
is a worse outcome than getting held accountable for using the N-word.
Yeah, but
it's all about the framing.
No, but Stephen's point is that one is worse
I
than the
don't
other.
think we can end this on this, Pierce. I can take 30 seconds here. If we're
Right,
talking about
right,
accountability,
but
like I said,
the league, but
false
we're pretending.
accountability.
But
So are you against catch and release?
That
Are you
framing
against
suggests
no
that the
cash
money
bail?
is going for
are
the
you against
behavior.
the discount under $1,000 or less, where a shopkeeper has to close down because of the name of systemic restorative justice? Are you against cash and release? Are you against cash bail? Are you against the idea that people can shoplift and not be held accountable for their actions? Let's talk real accountability for actions and not false accountability for words. I believe that stabbing someone is worse than saying a word. Both are bad. Me, Mr. Traditional.
You see what a grifter this Marc Lamont Hill is, right? He can't even acknowledge that stabbing someone is worse than using a word. And he suggests that Carmelo Anthony is going to get railroaded. How is he going to get railroaded? He murdered someone. There are witnesses. And that wasn't even a racial argument. And I'm sorry, Mark, you're wrong that you say the people that are funding Carmelo Anthony's GoFundMe, you're not wrong, you're lying, because they think the system's against him and it's an unfair justice system or something like that, and they don't want him to get railroaded. No, there's an expectation in the Black American community that you conform to what everyone else does. And if there's ever an argument between two people that has nothing to do with race, you have to take the side of the black. That's it. It's really sad. I don't like that. To me, that's quite a burden for people to feel like they have to act a certain way and say certain things just so their family and the people around them will still accept them. It's sad. Let's wrap up the video.
You know what?
Okay. Let me respond to that. Let me respond to that.
Quickly.
Because again, that is a disingenuous framing. No one is arguing that stabbing someone is better than using the word. My point is our response as a community to the stabbing is not to say, great job. Our response is, this was awful, but let's find out what really happened. No one is saying on the other side of this issue that N-word thing is awful, but let's hold this woman accountable, but let's not go too far. And if they are, I'm okay with that. But it's not apples and oranges. No one is saying what that woman did is worse than that kid getting stabbed. They're saying that the story of the stabbing hasn't been told well or properly, and we want justice for everybody. And to answer your cash bail, yes, I'm against cash bail. But I don't believe I don't believe that's the only way to hold people accountable. You can hold people accountable without cash bail.
I've got to leave it there, not least, Mark, because I'm worried about what you're doing to your ear at the moment. There's clearly an issue, a malfunction.
My microphone fell out.
And there's something, it looks like you're basically gouging your own ear out.
We want to hear from you. What did you guys think about this debate between Steven Crowder and Marc Lamont Hill on Piers Morgan Uncensored? Let us know in the comments. Anyways, as always, really appreciate you watching. We will see you on the next one.